The signal came from the dark edges of space. It was weak and full of fear. Ambassador Velis pressed her thin, trembling hands against the communication device and spoke into it with a voice that shook like dry leaves in wind. "Please," she said. "Anyone. We are dying. The harvesters have come. Our world is falling. Please, help us." The message traveled across the stars. It reached the great halls of the Galactic Concord, where 100 different species gathered to discuss matters of peace and trade. The alien delegates listened to the recording. They heard the terror in Velis's voice. They saw the images of Velith Prime burning under a black sky filled with enemy ships, and they did nothing. "The harvesters are too strong," said one delegate, a tall being with silver skin. "We cannot risk our fleets." "Velith Prime is dangerous," said another, a creature that looked like a floating cloud of gas. "The storms there would destroy our ships. The radiation would kill our soldiers." "The Ilari are peaceful," added a third. "They have no weapons. They have no army. They chose this fate when they refused to arm themselves." The debate continued for hours. Species argued with species. Some felt pity. Most felt fear. The harvesters were a nightmare that no one wanted to face. They were a swarm that moved from world to world, eating everything, leaving only dead rock behind. Far from the Concord halls, in orbit around a blue and green planet called Earth, Admiral Tejo Park listened to the same signal. He stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Horizon's Edge, and watched the recording play on the main screen. He saw the Ilari ambassador, small and fragile, with wings like a moth and eyes full of tears. He saw a mother holding her children behind her. He saw an entire species begging for someone to care. Tejo was not a young man. His hair had turned gray at the temples. His face carried the lines of many battles. He had served in the United Earth Fleet for 30 years. He had seen death. He had caused death. He knew what war looked like, but he also knew what mercy looked like. And right now, mercy was a hand reaching out to pull someone from drowning water. "Get me a channel to the Concord," he said to his communications officer. The Concord delegates were surprised when the human admiral appeared on their screens. Humans had been part of their organization for 80 years, but most species still did not trust them. Earth was a Class 1-2 death world. Its gravity was crushing. Its weather was violent. Its animals were monsters. And the humans themselves were worse. They could survive wounds that would kill anyone else. They could function without sleep for days. They could eat foods that were poison to other species. They healed from injuries that should have ended their lives. They were, by every measure, terrifying. "Admiral Park," said the Concord chairman, a being with too many eyes. "This is an internal matter. We are still discussing our response. Your response is taking too long," Tejo said. His voice was calm but firm. "The Ilari have 72 hours before the harvesters finish their work. Maybe less. We understand the urgency. But the risks are too great. No fleet can survive Velith Prime's conditions. And the harvesters won. I am volunteering the 7th Armada." Silence filled the chamber. The delegates looked at each other, with something between shock and horror. "You cannot be serious," said the silver-skinned delegate. "You would send humans, Deathworlders, to save the Ilari? They are the gentlest species in the galaxy. They would be terrified of you." Tejo smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They are already terrified. They are being hunted and killed. I think they would accept help from anyone right now, even monsters like us." "This is madness," another delegate said. "Humans are violent, unpredictable. You evolved on a world that tries to kill you every day. How can we trust you with the lives of innocents?" Tejo leaned forward. His eyes were hard but not cruel. "You are afraid of what we are. I understand. We come from a world of fire and storm and blood. We learned to fight before we learned to speak. We carry violence in our bones." He paused. But we also carry something else. We protect our own. And right now, those Illyri are calling for help. That makes them ours. The Concorde had no answer for that. Captain Yuna Kim received the orders 1 hour later. She stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and read the mission briefing on her tablet. 42 ships. Full combat deployment. Destination: Veleth Prime. Objective: rescue all Illyri survivors. She looked up at her crew. They were already preparing. Engineers checked systems. Soldiers loaded weapons. Pilots ran through flight checks. Everyone moved with purpose. All hands, Yuna said over the ship's speakers. This is the captain. We have received a distress call from the Illyri colony on Veleth Prime. They are under attack. They cannot defend themselves. They have asked for help. She took a breath. The Galactic Concorde says this mission is too dangerous. They say the conditions are too harsh. They say the enemy is too strong. They say we should not go. Her voice grew stronger. But someone is out there right now, holding their children and praying that anyone will come. Someone is out there hoping that the universe is not as cold and empty as it seems. She looked at the stars through the viewport. We are going to answer them. We are going to show them that when humans hear someone crying for help, we do not look away. We run toward the fire. The crew responded with a roar of approval. Admiral Tejo gave the final command. All ships, prepare for jump. Destination: Veleth Prime. The 7th Armada vanished into the light of hyperspace, racing toward a dying world. Behind them, the Galactic Concorde watched and waited. They did not believe the humans would succeed. They expected to receive news of another defeat, another tragedy. They did not understand humans at all. The 7th Armada came out of hyperspace into hell. Veleth Prime hung in the darkness like a wounded jewel. Its violet skies were choked with smoke. Its beautiful crystalline forests were burning. And surrounding the planet, like flies around a corpse, were thousands of harvester ships. The enemy saw the humans immediately. The swarm turned. Thousands of small attack drones rose from the larger bioships and flew toward the Armada. They moved like insects, fast and hungry. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Captain Yuna Kim watched the enemy approach on her tactical display. The numbers were not good. The humans were outnumbered 20-1. All ships, attack formation Delta, she ordered. Focus fire on the larger vessels. Ignore the drones until they reach weapons range. Admiral Tejo stood beside her, watching calmly. They expect us to run, he said. They will be disappointed, Yuna replied. The battle began. Human warships were not elegant. They were not graceful. They were built like hammers, thick and heavy and hard to break. While other species designed ships to avoid damage, humans designed ships to take damage and keep fighting. The harvesters learned this quickly. Their first wave of drones struck the human fleet like a storm of angry wasps. They fired acid projectiles and rammed themselves into hull plates. On any other species' ships, this would have caused chaos. Systems would fail. Crews would panic. The human ships shook. Alarms rang. Hull plates cracked. And the crews kept working. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported an officer on the horizon's edge. Seal it, Yuna said. Keep firing. We have wounded in engineering. Medical teams are on the way. Keep firing. The Armada pushed forward, cutting through the drone swarm like a knife through water. Human gunners targeted the massive harvester bioships, punching holes in their living hulls. One bioship exploded, then another, then 3 more. Far across the galaxy, Concorde observers watched the battle through long-range sensors. They could not believe what they were seeing. The humans were taking terrible damage. Their ships were bleeding atmosphere and fire. But they did not stop. They did not retreat. What are they doing? Whispered a Concorde official. They should pull back. They should regroup. In 1-4. 1-4. 1-4. Another official, older and wiser, shook his head. They are humans. They do not know how to quit. In the medical bay of the horizon's edge, Dr. Sujin Lee worked without rest. Wounded soldiers came to her with burns and broken bones, and wounds that would have killed members of other species. She treated them as fast as she could. One young Marine had a piece of metal stuck in his chest. It had missed his heart by 2 centimeters. Sujin removed it, sealed the wound, and watched in amazement as the man tried to stand up. "Where do you think you are going?" she asked. "Back to my post," he said. "The fight is not over. You almost died." He looked at her with tired but determined eyes. "Almost is not the same as did." She let him go. She had learned long ago that humans did not know how to stay down. While the space battle raged above, Lieutenant Minho Choi led the first rescue teams to the surface. Their drop pods fell through the atmosphere like burning stars, shaking violently as they passed through electrical storms and clouds of toxic spores. The conditions on Velith Prime were terrible. The radiation was high. The air was filled with chemicals that burned human lungs. The ground shook with earthquakes every few hours. For any other species, this would have been a death sentence. For humans, it was just another difficult day. Minho's pod crashed into a field of broken crystal trees. He kicked open the door and stepped out into the violet twilight. Around him, other pods were landing. His Marines formed up, checking their weapons and equipment. "Sergeant Woojin," Minho called. "Take your team east. Find survivors." Woojin Han nodded. He was a big man, with a scarred face and gentle eyes. He led his fire team vanguard into the burning forest without hesitation. They found the first Ilari survivors hiding in a collapsed building. There were about 30 of them, mostly children and elderly. Their moth-like wings were torn. Their large eyes were full of terror. When they saw the humans, they screamed. Woojin stopped. He raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. The Ilari pressed against the walls, shaking with fear. To them, humans were nightmares. Monsters from a death world. Creatures of violence and blood. Woojin understood. He had seen this fear before on other worlds. Slowly, carefully, he knelt down. He removed his helmet, even though the air burned his throat. He looked at a small Ilari child, who was crying in the corner, and he smiled. "My name is Woojin," he said softly. "I am here to help. I know I look scary. I know you have heard bad things about my people, but I promise you, I will not hurt you. None of us will." He held out his hand. "Will you trust me?" The child looked at him. Her large eyes studied his face. She saw the scars. She saw the weapons on his belt. She saw everything that should have made her run. But she also saw something else. She saw kindness. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Woojin smiled. "There you go. It is going to be okay. We are going to take you somewhere safe." Behind him, his team began helping the other survivors. They carried the wounded. They gave food and water to the hungry. They wrapped their own coats around children who were cold. Above them, the battle in space continued. Around them, the harvesters hunted. Ahead of them, a long and terrible night was coming. But in that moment, something important happened. The Ilari saw humans not as monsters, but as protectors. They saw that these scary Deathworlders had come across the stars to save strangers they had never met, and they began to hope. Engineer Hyun Baek did not have time to enjoy the moment. She was on the horizon's edge, crawling through a maintenance tunnel that was venting atmosphere into space. Her suit was the only thing keeping her alive, and even that was starting to fail. A power conduit had been destroyed in the battle. Without it, the ship's shields would fail within the hour. Hyun had to fix it. She worked with frozen fingers and burning lungs. She spliced cables and rerouted power. She welded broken connections while the ship shook from enemy fire. When she finished, she crawled back to safety and collapsed on the deck. A fellow engineer helped her up. "You did it," he said. "Shields are back online." Heyoon coughed and tasted blood. He stared at her. "You need medical attention. Later. What is next?" This was what it meant to be human. This was why the galaxy feared them. Not because they were cruel, not because they were evil, but because they simply refused to stop. They kept going when anyone else would fall. They kept fighting when anyone else would surrender. And they did it not for glory or conquest, but for the simple reason that someone needed help. The first day on Velith Prime ended with small victories. The orbital blockade was weakened. The first survivors were found. The first bonds of trust were formed. But the real test was coming. Night was falling on Velith Prime, and on this world, night lasted 60 hours. Darkness fell over Velith Prime like a black blanket. The violet sky turned to deep purple, then to the color of ink. The temperature dropped quickly. The wind began to howl through the crystal forests, and the harvesters came in greater numbers. Lieutenant Minho Choi stood at the edge of the human defensive line and watched the enemy approaching. The harvesters moved across the broken landscape like a wave of hungry shadows. Their insect-like bodies clicked and rattled as they ran. Their many eyes glowed red in the darkness. "All units, hold your positions," Minho said into his radio. "They will hit us hard." We hit back harder. Behind him, in the underground bunkers, over 10,000 Ilari survivors waited in fear. They were the last of their colony. Men, women, and children who had escaped the initial attack. They had no weapons. They could not fight. All they could do was pray and watch the humans stand between them and death. The first wave struck at midnight. The harvesters threw themselves at the human lines with mindless hunger. They did not care about their own losses. They did not feel fear. They only wanted to feed. Sergeant Wu Jin Han and his fireteam vanguard held the eastern entrance to the bunker complex. They had built barriers from wreckage and crystal stones. They had set up machine guns and explosives, and when the enemy came, they fought. Wu Jin fired until his weapon overheated. He switched to his backup. When that ran out of ammunition, he picked up a fallen harvester claw and used it as a club. Around him, his team did the same. They fought with guns, knives, fists, and fury. Hours passed. The attack continued. By the third hour, Wu Jin had been wounded twice. A harvester claw had cut his left arm. A piece of debris had hit his head. Blood ran down his face, making it hard to see. But he did not stop. He could not stop. Behind him were 10,000 innocent people who were counting on him. "Sergeant, you need medical attention," said one of his soldiers. "Later," Wu Jin replied. "Is the line holding?" "Barely." "Then it is holding. Keep fighting." Deep inside the bunker, Elder Oren watched the battle through security cameras that the humans had set up. He was the leader of the Ilari survivors. He was old and tired and had seen his world destroyed in a single day. Everything he loved was gone. And now these strange creatures from a death world were dying to protect what remained. He did not understand. When Lieutenant Minho came to check on the survivors during a brief pause in the fighting, Oren approached him. The human was covered in dirt and blood and sweat. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His hands shook from exhaustion. But he still smiled when he saw the Ilari elder. "Are your people comfortable?" Minho asked. "Do you need anything? Water? Food?" Oren stared at him. "Why are you doing this?" Minho looked confused. "What do you mean? Why are you fighting for us? Dying for us? We are nothing to your kind. We are weak. We cannot help you. We have no weapons, no technology, no resources to offer. We are just small, fragile things that the galaxy has forgotten." Oren's voice broke. "Why do you care?" Quote. Minho was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the sounds of battle continued. His radio crackled with reports from other units. He should have been out there fighting. Instead, he knelt down so he could look the elder in the eyes. "You asked for help," he said simply. "That is enough. But the cost does not matter. When someone is drowning, you do not ask if they can pay you back. Before you pull them out of the water, you just reach out your hand. Row." Oren felt tears forming in his eyes. "Your people will die here. Some of them will," Minho agreed. His voice was sad but steady. "But your people will live. All of them. I promise you that." He stood up and checked his weapon. "I have to get back to the line. Stay safe, Elder. We will get you out of here." Brr. Brr. Then he was gone, running back toward the sounds of screaming and gunfire. Oren stood alone in the bunker, surrounded by his frightened people. For the first time since the harvesters came, he felt something other than despair. He felt hope. In orbit above the planet, Captain Yuna Kim faced her own crisis. The harvester fleet was too large. Even with all the damage the Armada had done, there were still too many enemy ships. They could not break through to evacuate the survivors. She needed a new plan. "Dr. Sujin," she called over the communication system. "What is the status of your research?" In the science lab, Sujin Lee looked up from her work. She had been studying captured harvester samples for hours, trying to find a weakness. And finally, she had found one. "Captain, the harvesters communicate through chemical signals," she explained. "Pheromones. It is how the swarm coordinates. If we can disrupt those signals, the swarm will fall into chaos. Can you create something that will disrupt them?" "Yes. A synthetic pheromone compound. But it needs to be deployed at the source. The hive ship. Their queen is there, sending out the commands. If we can poison her signal." Yuna understood. "We would need to board the hive ship." "Yes, that is a suicide mission." Sujin was quiet. Then she said, "Perhaps. But it might be the only way." Yuna thought about the Marines on the ground. She thought about the Ilari in the bunkers. She thought about all the people who were depending on them. "Keep working on the compound," she said. "I will talk to the Admiral." The long night continued. Hour after hour, the humans held their ground. They rotated soldiers when they could, but there were never enough. Men and women who should have been resting went back to the fighting lines because there was no one else. An Ilari healer named Suri was assigned to help the human medics. She was young and terrified, but she wanted to help. For hours, she watched the human wounded come in. She saw a woman with a broken leg set her own bone so she could return to fighting. She saw a man with burns covering half his body refuse pain medication because it might slow his reactions. She saw soldiers laugh and joke with each other even as they bled. "What are you?" she whispered to herself. An injured Marine heard her. He was missing 2 fingers on his right hand, but he was still trying to load ammunition clips. "We are human," he said with a tired grin. "We are stubborn. It is kind of our thing. Does nothing stop you?" The Marine thought about it. "Death stops us eventually. But even then, we like to think we made it work hard for it." Suri did not know whether to be terrified or amazed. She decided she was both. By the end of the long night, the human forces had suffered terrible losses. Over 300 soldiers were dead. Twice that number were wounded. Every ship in the Armada had damage. Every Marine on the ground was exhausted. But the line had held. Not a single harvester had reached the bunkers. Not a single Ilari had died since the humans arrived. As the first light of dawn touched the violet sky, Sergeant Wujin Han sat down against a broken wall and closed his eyes. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. His body screamed with pain, but he was smiling. A small Ilari child, the same one who had first taken his hand, came and sat next to him. She leaned against his arm and said nothing. Wujin opened one eye and looked at her. "Are you okay, little one?" She nodded. "You are hurt. I will heal. Humans are good at that. Why do you keep fighting? He thought about the question. Then he put his arm around her small shoulders. Because if we stop, the bad things win. And we cannot let that happen. Not while there are still people who need protecting. The child looked up at him with her big, beautiful eyes. I am glad you came. Woojin smiled. Me too, little one. But dawn was not the end. It was only a brief pause. The harvesters were regrouping. Their queen was sending new commands. The final battle was coming, and the humans were ready to meet it. The plan was simple. The plan was also insane. Captain Yuna Kim stood before Admiral Taeho Park in the command center of the Horizon's Edge. Around them, the surviving ships of the 7th Armada floated in defensive formation. Below them, Velith Prime waited for rescue. We need to board the hive ship, Yuna said. Dr. Sujin has finished the pheromone weapon. If we can deploy it at the center of the hive, near the queen, the entire swarm will fall apart. Taeho studied the tactical display. The hive ship was massive. It was alive. A creature of flesh and bone that stretched for kilometers. Its surface crawled with millions of drones. Inside, the corridors were filled with acid and poison and death. The chances of survival are very low, he said quietly. Yes, the team that goes in will probably not come back. Yes, Taeho looked at her. And you still want to do this? Yuna met his eyes without flinching. 10,000 Ilari are counting on us. Hundreds of our own soldiers are dying on that planet. If there is even a small chance this works, we have to take it. We have to take it. Taeho was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Choose your team. And may whatever gods exist watch over you. Lieutenant Minho Choi volunteered immediately. When he heard about the mission, he did not hesitate for even a second. I am going, he said. Dr. Sujin Lee insisted on joining. The weapon is complicated. It needs to be deployed correctly. You need me there. That. Sergeant Woojin Han stepped forward too. You will need someone to keep the bugs off you. 3 other Marines joined them. Their names were Jiwon, Daesung, and Unji. They were young and scared and incredibly brave. They knew they might not survive. They went anyway. The boarding shuttle launched from the Horizon's Edge under cover of a massive attack. The rest of the Armada threw everything they had at the Harvester fleet, creating chaos and confusion. It was the only way to give the small shuttle a chance to slip through. Captain Yuna watched them go. Her heart was heavy. These were her people, her friends. Come back, she whispered. All of you. The shuttle crashed into the side of the hive ship, burning through the organic hull. The team tumbled out into darkness. The inside of the hive ship was a nightmare. The walls were made of living tissue that pulsed and breathed. The air was thick with poison that burned their lungs even through their masks. The floor was covered in strange liquid that hissed against their boots. And everywhere, there were harvesters. Move fast, Minho ordered. Stay together. Protect Sujin at all costs. They pushed forward. Woojin took the lead, cutting through drones with his combat blade. Jiwon and Daesung covered the flanks. Unji guarded the rear. Minho stayed close to Sujin, making sure nothing touched her. The fighting was brutal. Daesung was the first to fall. A harvester warrior caught him from behind, its claws piercing his armor. He turned and shot it in the face. But more were coming. He looked at Minho and nodded. Keep going, he said. I will hold them here. Daesung, go. They ran. Behind them, they heard Daesung's weapon firing. They heard him screaming, a battle cry. Then, they heard silence. Unji fell next. A swarm of small drones overwhelmed her at a junction point. She pushed Sujin forward and turned to face them alone. Her last words were a simple prayer from her childhood. Jiwon made it further. He held a corridor for 5 minutes, while the others climbed through a narrow passage. When the harvesters finally broke through, he detonated a grenade. taking dozens of them with him. Only 4 remained: Minho, Sujin, Woojin, and the mission. They found the center of the hive ship after what felt like hours. It was a vast chamber, filled with strange light. And in the middle, connected to everything by thousands of organic cables, was the queen. She was enormous. Her body was a mountain of flesh and chitin. Her eyes, hundreds of them, turned toward the intruders. Her mouth opened, and a sound came out that was not a voice but a feeling: hatred, hunger, rage. "Deploy the weapon," Minho said to Sujin. "I will keep her busy." "Minho, you cannot fight that alone." "Do it," he charged. Minho was not a big man. He was not the strongest or the fastest. But he had something that the Harvester Queen did not understand. He had love for the people he was protecting, and he had the stubborn refusal to die that all humans carried in their blood. He dodged her first attack, a massive limb that could have crushed a vehicle. He fired his weapon into her eyes, blinding several of them. He threw grenades at her base, making her scream. He drew her attention, all of it, giving Sujin time to work. The queen struck him. Once, twice, 3 times. His armor cracked. His bones broke. Blood filled his mouth. But he kept moving. He kept fighting. "Is it ready?" he shouted. Sujin was crying as she worked. Her hands shook. The device was almost complete. Almost. Just a little more. Woojin joined the fight. He had been guarding Sujin, but he could not watch Minho die alone. Together, the 2 men faced the monster. They were bleeding. They were broken. They were laughing. "This is crazy," Woojin said. "Yes," Minho agreed. "But it is working." The queen roared and struck again. Woojin went flying, hitting the wall with a terrible sound. He did not get up. Minho faced the queen alone. His weapon was empty. His body was failing. But he planted his feet and refused to move. "You will not have them," he said. "Not the Alari. Not my people. Not anyone. You lose, monster. You lose." Behind him, Sujin activated the weapon. The synthetic pheromone exploded outward in an invisible wave. It flooded the hive ship. It reached every drone, every warrior, every creature connected to the queen's network, and it poisoned them all. The queen screamed. Her own commands became corrupted. Her children stopped obeying. All across the fleet, harvester ships began to turn on each other. Drones attacked their own hive mates. Warriors tore into bioships. The swarm collapsed into chaos. On the surface of Velith Prime, the harvester assault suddenly stopped. The creatures froze, confused, then began fighting each other. The human marines watched in disbelief as their enemy destroyed itself. In orbit, Captain Yuna saw the change immediately. "All ships, attack now," she ordered. "Destroy the hive ship before they recover." The Armada fired everything. Missiles and energy beams and kinetic rounds slammed into the massive creature. It burned. It screamed. It died. But inside, Sujin was trying to save her friends. Woojin was unconscious but alive. Minho was barely breathing. They needed extraction immediately. "This is Dr. Sujin Lee," she said into her radio. "Mission complete. We need rescue. Now. Please." The response came seconds later. "Shuttle inbound." "Hold on." She held Minho's hand as they waited. His eyes flickered open, and he looked at her. "Did it work?" he whispered. "Yes, it worked. You did it." He smiled. His face was covered in blood, but his smile was peaceful. "Good," he said. "That is good." The rescue shuttle arrived as the hive ship collapsed around them. Soldiers pulled them out through fire and falling debris. They made it to safety with seconds to spare. Behind them, the heart of the swarm died, and across Velith Prime, the harvesters fell silent forever. The sun rose over Velith Prime for the first time in 3 days. Its light spilled across the broken crystal forests, making them sparkle like scattered diamonds. The violet sky cleared. The toxic clouds began to fade. And everywhere, there was silence. The harvesters were gone. Admiral Tejo Park stood on the observation deck of the horizon's edge and looked down at the world they had saved. His fleet floated around him, battered and scarred. 11 ships had been lost completely. Every surviving vessel had damage. Over 2,000 soldiers had died in the battle. But below, on that wounded planet, 10,847 Ilari were alive. Every single survivor had been protected. Not one had died after the humans arrived. It was the most costly victory Tejo had ever commanded. It was also the one he was most proud of. Shuttles began carrying Concord diplomats down to the surface. They had been watching from a safe distance, waiting to see what would happen. Now, they came to inspect the aftermath. They expected to find death and destruction. They found something very different. In the main survivor camp, human Marines were playing games with Ilari children. They were teaching them to catch balls, to build towers with blocks, to draw pictures in the dirt. The soldiers were exhausted. Many were wounded. But they smiled and laughed as if they had all the energy in the world. The Concord observers did not understand. They just fought a terrible battle, one of them said. They lost friends. They almost died. Why are they playing with children? An older human soldier overheard the question. He shrugged. Because the children were scared, he said simply. And we wanted them to know that the scary times are over. What better way than playing? 1. The observer had no answer for that. In the medical bay of the horizon's edge, Lieutenant Minho Choi slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Captain Yuna Kim sitting beside his bed. She looked tired, but happy. Welcome back, she said. Minho tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his entire body. He groaned. Easy, Yuna said. You have broken ribs, a fractured skull, internal bleeding that was repaired, and more cuts and bruises than the doctors could count. You should be dead, but I am not. No, you are not. She shook her head. Stubborn humans. Minho managed a weak smile. Woojin is already demanding to leave medical. The nurses had to threaten to tie him down. Sujin is fine. She is already writing a scientific paper about the harvester pheromones. And Daizung, Jiwon, Oinji? Yuna's smile faded. They did not make it. None of them. The silence that followed was heavy with grief. Minho closed his eyes. 3 good soldiers. 3 friends. Gone. Forever. They knew the risks, Yuna said softly. They went anyway. Because that is what we do. I know. Minho's voice was rough with emotion. But it still hurts. Yes, it always does. They sat together in silence, honoring the fallen with their memories. On the surface, Elder Oren made his way through the camp, looking for the human admiral. He found Tejo, talking to a group of Marines, making sure they were getting food and rest. The old Ilari waited patiently until the admiral noticed him. Elder Oren, Tejo said with a respectful nod. Is there something you need? Oren looked at this human. This creature from a death world. This monster that his people had been taught to fear. He saw the gray in his hair, the lines on his face, the kindness in his eyes. Then, slowly, the ancient Ilari bowed. It was a deep bow, the kind reserved for the greatest respect. We called for help, Oren said, his voice shaking. We sent our signal into the void, hoping that someone would hear. We did not expect anyone to answer. The galaxy had already decided we were not worth saving. He looked up at Tejo with tears in his eyes. But you came. You fought. You died. For us. For strangers you had never met. For people who could offer you nothing in return. Elder, let me finish. Please. Oren took a shaky breath. We were taught to fear your kind. Deathworlders. They called you. Monsters. Savages. We thought you only knew violence and destruction. His voice grew stronger. We were wrong. You are not monsters. You are guardians. You use your strength not to conquer, but to protect. Your violence is not cruelty. It is love wearing armor. Tejo was quiet for a moment. Then he placed his hand gently on the elder's shoulder. We heard you, he said simply. That is all that mattered. Ambassador Velis made a broadcast to the entire Galactic Concord that evening. Her face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. Billions of beings watched as this small, fragile creature spoke about the humans. We feared the Deathworlders, she said. We were taught they were dangerous and unpredictable. We were not wrong. They are all of those things. She paused. But we were not told the full truth. We were not told that they would spend their violence protecting those who could not protect themselves. We were not told that they would laugh and weep and bleed for strangers. We were not told that they would hold our children and tell them stories to help them sleep. Her voice filled with emotion. We were not told that Deathworlders could be kind. Across the galaxy, the perception of humanity began to change. The fear remained. It always would. But now, there was something else. Respect. Admiration. Gratitude. Humans were still terrifying. But now the galaxy understood why. They were not terrifying because they were cruel. They were terrifying because when they loved something, they would destroy anything that threatened it. They would cross the stars, face impossible odds, and sacrifice their lives for people they had never met. That kind of love was the most frightening thing in the universe. 3 days later, the 7th Armada prepared to leave. The repairs were mostly complete. The wounded, who could travel, were aboard. The dead had been honored with ceremonies that both humans and Ilari attended together. In the medical bay, Minho was finally able to sit up. Yuna came to visit him again. The Ilari Council has made a formal request, she said. They want humans to be named permanent protectors of their species. They want an alliance. A real one. Minho laughed, then winced at the pain in his ribs. It was a pretty impressive rescue mission. I suppose so. He looked out the window at Velith Prime below. We just wanted to help. That was all. Yuna smiled. That is the most human thing there is. On the surface, as the Armada's engines began to power up, the Ilari gathered to watch them leave. Thousands of them stood in the open air, looking up at the sky. They waved and sang songs of gratitude. Sergeant Wu Jin Han stood at the edge of the crowd with the small Ilari child, who had been by his side since that first meeting. She was holding his hand again. Do you have to go? She asked. Wu Jin knelt down to look at her. Yes, but I want you to know something. Wherever we go, we will remember you. All of you. And if you ever need help again, just call. We will come running. Promise? Promise. She hugged him then, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Wu Jin held her gently, careful not to hurt her fragile body with his strength. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving us. Thank you, he replied, for giving us something worth fighting for. The Armada rose into the sky, their engines leaving trails of light against the violet heavens. The Ilari watched until the ships were just stars among stars. Then, slowly, they began to rebuild. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Admiral Tejo gave the order to jump to hyperspace. The fleet vanished in a flash of light, racing back toward Earth. Behind them, Velith Prime began to heal. The crystal forests would grow again. The cities would be rebuilt, and a generation of Ilari children would grow up with stories of the scary but wonderful creatures who came from the stars to save them. The Deathworlders, the humans, the protectors. Far across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered. If humans would do all of this for strangers, what would they do for friends? What would they do for allies? What would they do for family? Some species felt afraid. But many more felt something new. Hope. Maybe the universe was not as cold as they thought. Maybe there were beings out there who believed that life was precious, that the helpless deserved protection, that love was stronger than fear. Maybe, just maybe, the monsters were actually heroes, and somewhere in the endless void of space, another distress signal was already being sent. Another world was crying out for help. The humans were already on their way.